There is something about you that everyone in your life can see. Your friends see it, your family sees it, your coworkers, your partners, even strangers who've only known you for an hour, they see it. But you don't. You can't. And no matter how self-aware you think you are, there's a part of your behavior that operates completely outside your field of vision. The question isn't whether you have blind spots. You do. The question is what they're costing you. This is the uncomfortable truth about self-awareness. It has a limit. And that limit isn't intelligence. It isn't effort. It isn't how many therapy sessions you've had or how many self-help books line your shelf. The limit is built into the architecture of your mind because some things about you were never meant to be seen. They were meant to be hidden. From others, yes, but most importantly, from yourself. And they've been running your life ever since. Think about the last time someone gave you feedback that stung. Not because it was cruel, but because somewhere underneath your defensiveness, you suspected it might be true. Maybe they said you get defensive when you're wrong. Maybe they said you shut down when things get emotional. Maybe they said you always do this, and you had no idea what they were talking about. But they did. They'd seen it 100 times. They just stopped pointing it out because you never seemed to hear it. That's what a blind spot feels like from the inside, invisible. And that's what it looks like from the outside, obvious.
Here's the thing about blind spots. They're not random. They're not accidents of perception. They're protected. Your mind built walls around certain behaviors, certain patterns, certain truths about yourself, and it did so for a reason. At some point, seeing those things clearly would have been too painful, too threatening, too destabilizing to the story you needed to believe about who you are. So your psyche made a decision. It hid them, not in a drawer you forgot about, in a room you don't even know exists. Let's talk about why this happens, why we can see everyone else's patterns so clearly. The friend who always picks unavailable partners, the coworker who takes everything personally, the family member who can never admit they're wrong, but we can't see our own.
The first reason is simple. You're too close. You've been living inside yourself your entire life. You've never had the experience of meeting you for the first time. You've never watched yourself walk into a room, carry a conversation, react under pressure. You only know what it feels like from the inside, and what it feels like from the inside is often very different from what it looks like from the outside. You might feel like you're being direct. Others might experience you as harsh. You might feel like you're being flexible. Others might see you as passive, unsure, hard to read. You might feel like you're calm under pressure. Others might notice your jaw tightening, your words getting clipped, your energy shifting in ways you're completely unaware of.
This is the gap, the space between intention and impact, between your inner experience and your outer expression. And in that gap lives everything you don't know about yourself. But here's where it goes deeper. The second reason you can't see your blind spots is because your identity depends on not seeing them. We all carry a story about who we are. I'm the honest one. I'm the easygoing one. I'm the one who doesn't need anyone. I'm the one who always shows up. These narratives aren't lies exactly, but they're incomplete. They're curated versions of a much more complex truth. And the parts that don't fit the narrative, they get pushed out of view. If your identity is built on being the strong one, you won't see the ways you're quietly falling apart. If your identity is built on being the kind one, you won't see the resentment simmering underneath your generosity. If your identity is built on being the rational one, you won't see the emotion driving every decision you claim is logical.
This isn't hypocrisy, it's survival. Because when you're young, identity isn't a luxury, it's a strategy. You figure out which version of you gets love, gets safety, gets approval, and you build your entire self around that version. The other parts, the ones that didn't fit, didn't disappear, they just went underground. And now they run your life from a place you can't see. Let's talk about where blind spots actually come from, because they're not just perceptual errors,
They're adaptations, survival strategies that became so automatic, so habitual, that they faded from awareness entirely. Think about a child who grows up in a home where anger wasn't allowed, where any expression of frustration was met with punishment, withdrawal, or shame. That child learns quickly. Anger is dangerous. Anger means rejection, so they bury it. They learn to smile when they're furious. They learn to go quiet when they want to scream. And eventually, they lose access to the anger entirely. They become an adult who says, "I never really get angry," not realizing that the anger is still there. It just comes out sideways, in passive-aggressive comments, in sudden explosions that seem to come out of nowhere, in resentment they can't name, but everyone around them can feel. That's a blind spot, not a flaw, an adaptation that outlived its usefulness. Or think about a child who learned that the only way to get attention was to perform, to be exceptional, impressive, always on. That child grows into an adult who can't stop achieving, not because they love success, but because they're terrified of what happens if they slow down. They might describe themselves as driven, ambitious, passionate, but the people around them see something different. They see someone who can't rest, someone who makes everything a competition, someone who's exhausting to be around because nothing is ever enough. The achiever can't see it because seeing it would mean confronting the wound underneath, the belief that they're only worth something when they're producing. This is how blind spots operate. They're not just hidden behaviors, they're hidden needs, hidden wounds, hidden beliefs about yourself that are too painful to look at directly. So you look everywhere else instead. And then there's the mirror effect. This is where it gets really uncomfortable. You know that thing that drives you crazy about other people? The coworker who always has to be right, the friend who makes everything about themselves, the partner who shuts down whenever you try to have a real conversation? What if the reason it bothers you so much isn't because they're wrong, but because you recognize something in them that you've refused to see in yourself? Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of yourself you've disowned, projected outward onto others so you don't have to own them yourself. The people who trigger you most aren't random. They're mirrors. They're showing you the parts of yourself that you've hidden so well, even you forgot they were there. This doesn't mean every irritation is a projection. Sometimes people are just annoying. But when the reaction is disproportionate, when you feel a visceral charge, a deep frustration that seems to exceed the situation, that's worth examining. Because strong reactions are rarely about the other person. They're about what the other person is reflecting back. The hardest part of all this isn't learning that you have blind spots, it's having them revealed. There's a reason people get defensive when they receive feedback. It's not just ego, it's identity threat. When someone holds up a mirror to a part of you that contradicts the story you've been telling yourself, it doesn't just feel like criticism, it feels like an attack on who you are. Your nervous system responds accordingly. It floods you with defensiveness, rationalization, counterattack, anything to protect the self-image you spent a lifetime building.
This is why most feedback doesn't land. Not because it's wrong, but because the person receiving it isn't ready to let go of the version of themselves that the feedback threatens. And that's the real work.
Not just seeing the blind spot, but being willing to let it change your story. So how do you start seeing what you can't see? How do you access the parts of yourself that have been hidden for years, maybe decades? The first step is humility. Real humility, not the performative kind where you say, "I'm always open to feedback," while privately dismissing everything that doesn't match your self-perception, but the kind where you genuinely accept that there are things about you that you don't know, that your perspective on yourself is limited by design, that the people around you might see things you can't, not because they're smarter, but because they have distance you don't. The second step
is curiosity over defensiveness. When someone reflects something back to you, especially if it stings, try pausing before you react. Instead of explaining why they're wrong, ask yourself, what if they're right?
What would it mean if this were true? What part of me might I be protecting by not seeing this? That pause is everything. It's the difference between automatic defense and conscious reflection, and it's where self-awareness actually grows.
The third step is pattern recognition. You might not be able to see your blind spots directly, but you can see their effects. Look at the recurring themes in your life, the same feedback you keep getting from different people, the same conflicts that show up in every relationship, the same walls you hit over and over again. These patterns are clues. They're pointing to something underneath that you haven't fully seen yet. And the fourth step is the hardest, integration. Because seeing a blind spot isn't enough. You have to let it become part of your story. You have to make room for the part of yourself you've been rejecting, the anger you buried, the neediness you pretended didn't exist, the fear underneath the confidence, the insecurity underneath the performance. This doesn't mean becoming those things. It means owning them. It means saying, yes, this is also part of me, and I don't have to hide it anymore. That's when the real transformation happens. Not when you fix yourself, but when you stop pretending you were never broken in the first place. Here's the truth. You will never see yourself completely. There will always be gaps, always be parts of you that operate beneath conscious awareness. That's not a failure. That's being human. But the goal isn't total transparency. The goal is expanding the window, seeing a little more today than you did yesterday, letting in feedback that would have destroyed you before, sitting with reflections that used to feel unbearable. Every time you do that, the blind spot shrinks, not because you forced it open, but because you stopped needing to hide from it. And here's what nobody tells you about this process.
It gets harder before it gets easier. Because once you start seeing patterns you couldn't see before, once you start recognizing the ways you've been showing up that contradict the story you believed about yourself, something else often rises to the surface. A feeling that maybe you've been fooling everyone. That the person people think you are isn't the real you. That now that you see yourself more clearly, you're not sure you deserve any of the good things you've received. That feeling has a name, and in the next video, we're going to look at it directly. Why you feel like a fraud, even when you're not. Why imposter syndrome often intensifies when you're actually becoming more self-aware. And what's really going on underneath that voice that keeps telling you you're about to be found out. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching videos, you're doing the work. Subscribe if you want to keep going. This is only the beginning of seeing what's been hidden. Stop fixing, start understanding.